March 24, 1944. 11:30 at night. The German prisoner of war camp Stalag Luft III, near Sagan in occupied Polish Silesia. 76 Allied Air Force officers crawl through a tunnel 102 meters long, 9 meters underground, 60 centimeters wide. They emerge into a wooded area in the freezing pine forest north of the camp wire. They scatter into the German night. The Great Escape has begun. The escape was organized by a 33-year-old Royal Air Force Squadron Leader named Roger Joyce Bushell. Cambridge-educated barrister. South African birth. Known to the escape committee as Big X. He had escaped twice before. He had been warned that a third would mean execution. He went anyway. Watch for 3 tunnels named Tom, Dick, and Harry. Watch for 50 wooden urns. Watch for the 3 who made it home. Stalag Luft III was activated by the Luftwaffe in March 1942. It was located 3 kilometers south of the town of Sagan, in what was then Lower Silesia. It was designed specifically as an escape-proof camp for Allied Air Force officers. The Luftwaffe knew that downed pilots were the most committed escapers in any army. The camp's anti-escape design included 3 innovations. First, the prisoner barracks were raised on wooden stilts above the ground. Second, geophones, sensitive seismic microphones, were buried at intervals around the camp perimeter. They could detect digging. Third, the soil itself. Stalag Luft III sat on bright yellow sand. The sand was visible at any depth. The yellow color contrasted sharply with the surface gray-brown topsoil. Any prisoner caught with yellow sand on his clothing, in his pockets, or under his fingernails was suspected of digging. The contrast was the camp's primary defense. The senior camp commandant from October 1942 was Oberst Friedrich Wilhelm von Lindner-Wildau, age 61. A Prussian junker. A career Luftwaffe officer. Lindner-Wildau was, by the post-war recollection of every surviving Allied prisoner, a humane officer. He treated his prisoners with formal courtesy. He fed them adequately. He did not order beatings. He had only one operational requirement. Nobody escaped. He told his prisoners directly, in a March 1942 address, that he would consider any escape attempt a personal betrayal. By March 1943, the population of Stalag Luft III was approximately 10,000 Allied airmen. Most were British, Canadian, Australian, New Zealand, South African, and American officers. Among them, in the spring of 1943, was Squadron Leader Roger Joyce Bushell. He had been born in Springs, Transvaal, on March 30, 1910. He had attended Wellington College and Pembroke College, Cambridge. Before the war, he had been a barrister at the Inner Temple in London, specializing in libel cases. He had also been a champion skier, a member of the British team at the 1936 Winter Olympics in Garmisch-Partenkirchen. He had been shot down on May 23, 1940, while flying a Spitfire of 92 Squadron over the Dunkirk evacuation beaches. He had crashed near Boulogne. He had been captured by the Germans within 90 minutes. He had escaped from his first prison camp, Stalag Luft Transit Camp at Frankfurt, on October 15, 1940. He had been recaptured on the Czech border on October 21. He had escaped from his second camp, Offlag 4C at Kolditz, on October 15, 1942. He had reached Czechoslovakia. He had been sheltered for 6 weeks by the Czech resistance. He had been arrested in Prague on December 20, 1942, by the Gestapo. He had been beaten in the Petschek Palace prison. He had been transferred to Stalag Luft III on April 3, 1943. Within 72 hours of his arrival, he had been elected leader of the camp's escape committee, known internally as Big X. He had begun planning Stalag Luft III's mass escape on April 6, 1943. Bushell's plan, presented to the escape committee on April 20, 1943, called for the simultaneous excavation of 3 deep tunnels. He gave them code names: Tom, Dick, Harry. The 3 tunnels would be excavated from beneath 3 separate barracks. Each would extend under the camp perimeter. Each would surface in the wooded area approximately 100 meters beyond the wire. If the Germans discovered one tunnel, the others would still be available. 2 tunnels were redundancy. 3 tunnels were paranoia. Bushell wanted 3. He also calculated that the actual escape would require approximately 200 men to make it out before the Germans noticed. The committee agreed. 200 would be the operational target. The tunnel engineering project was assigned to Flight Lieutenant Wally Floody, age 25, of Toronto, Canada. Floody had been a mining engineer at the Kirkland Lake Gold Mines in Ontario before the war. Floody designed the 3 tunnels to standard Canadian hard rock mining specifications, scaled down for human-only passage. 60 cm by 60 cm cross-section. Wooden shoring at 50 cm intervals. Each tunnel descended approximately 9 meters below ground level, deep enough to be below the geophone's detection range. Each then ran horizontally toward the wire and the woods beyond. The wooden shoring came from prisoner bed boards. Each prisoner barracks was equipped with wooden bunks. Each bunk contained approximately 40 wooden boards across the mattress frame. Approximately 4,000 bed boards were systematically removed from prisoner bunks during the 11-month tunnel construction period. Most prisoners slept on 24 boards instead of 40. Many slept on 12. Lighting in the tunnels was provided by electrical wire stolen from the camp's primary lighting circuit. The wire was rerouted through hidden conduits to small bulbs in the tunnel ceiling. Approximately 100 meters of wire were stolen. Approximately 12 electrical bulbs were installed. The Germans noticed the increased electrical drain. They blamed the prisoners' tea brewing equipment. Air ventilation in the tunnels was provided by a hand-operated bellows system, designed by pilot officer Robert Ramsey, age 28, of Newcastle, England. The bellows used Klim powdered milk tins as cylinder casings. Klim, milk spelled backwards, was an American Red Cross parcel item. The empty cans were one of the few standardized cylindrical objects available to prisoners. They became, in 1943-44, the unofficial currency of underground engineering. Disposal of excavated yellow sand was the single most difficult problem. The tunnel excavated approximately 228 cubic meters of sand. The sand could not be visible anywhere on the camp's gray-brown surface. The solution was the penguins. These were prisoners who walked the camp paths with cloth bags of yellow sand suspended inside their trouser legs. The bags had drawstrings. By pulling the drawstring while walking and dragging a foot across the released sand, a penguin could distribute approximately 2 kilograms of yellow sand per circuit of the camp. Approximately 200 prisoners served as penguins between April 1943 and March 1944. Each made between 3 and 10 circuits per day. The total sand distributed was approximately 220 cubic meters. The forging of identity documents was assigned to a section codenamed Dean and Dawson, after a popular British travel agency. Its head was Sergeant Tim Whalen, age 27, of London. Whalen had been a junior cartographer at the British Ordnance Survey before the war. He had a draftsman's hand. He copied German military and civilian identity documents in pencil and ink, by hand, individual by individual. His section produced approximately 250 forged documents over 11 months. Each document took, on average, 6 weeks of full-time work to complete. Each was tailored to a specific escaper's cover identity. The civilian clothing required by the escapers was prepared by a section codenamed Hornley, after a famous mountain hut at the base of the Matterhorn. Its head was Flight Lieutenant Tommy Guest, age 25, of Yorkshire. Guest had been an apprentice tailor at Burton's of Leeds before the war. His section converted Royal Air Force tunics, trousers, and overcoats into civilian-style clothing by removing buttons, dyeing fabric, and restitching seams. The dyeing was conducted with a mixture of beetroot juice, taken from German rations, and pencil graphite. The graphite gave gray and black hues. The beetroot juice gave red, brown, and purple. The conversion of a single Royal Air Force greatcoat into a passable German civilian overcoat required approximately 20 hours of work. Each garment was tailored to a specific escaper. The intelligence section, gathering information on German train schedules, identity card formats, and border crossing procedures, was led by Squadron Leader Robert Stanford Tuck, age 26, of Catford, London. Stanford Tuck's section operated through the camp's barbed wire fence. Information was traded with German guards and civilian camp workers in exchange for cigarettes, chocolate, and Red Cross parcel items. The barter rate, by January 1944, was approximately 1 packet of American Red Cross cigarettes per day's worth of train schedule information. The total cigarette commitment of the operation, by Stanford Tuck's calculation, was approximately 14,000 packets. On the morning of September 7, 1943, the German camp staff conducting routine perimeter inspection noticed a small section of disturbed earth near Hut 123. They ordered an excavation. They found Tunnel Tom. Tom had been 90 meters long at the time of discovery. It had been within 15 meters of completion. The escape committee, on hearing the news on September 8, decided to abandon Tom and to continue with Dick and Harry. Tunnel Dick had, by September 1943, been retasked. The committee had decided in July to use it not for escape but as the storage facility for the yellow sand from Harry. The Penguin solution had not been keeping up with Harry's excavation rate. By March 1944, Tunnel Harry had reached 102 meters in length. Its surface exit point, calculated by Floodys Mining Engineering, was supposed to be inside the wooded area 20 meters beyond the camp's outer wire. On March 19, Bushell ordered the final pre-escape preparations. 200 escapers were selected from the approximately 600 prisoners who had supported the project. The selection was by lottery. The first 30 escapers were the senior committee members and the men with the best forged documents and most thorough cover stories. They would, Bushell judged, have the highest probability of reaching home. The remaining 170 were called hard arses. They had only basic forged documents and rudimentary cover stories. They would walk to the local rail station and try to board trains. Most would be caught. The escape was scheduled for the night of March 23 or 24, 1944, depending on the moon phase. The new moon arrived on March 24. Bushell selected that night. At 21:30 hours on the evening of March 24, 1944, the first escaper entered Tunnel Harry. He was Squadron Leader Lawrence Reavel Carter, age 32, of London. He had drawn lottery position number 1. Reavel Carter crawled the 102 meters of Tunnel Harry in approximately 12 minutes. He emerged from the tunnel exit at 21:42 hours. He immediately discovered a problem. The exit was not, as Floodys Engineering had calculated, inside the wooded area. It was 9 meters short of the woods, in open ground covered by light snow. Reavel Carter was visible to the camp's guard towers if a guard happened to be looking in his direction. The escape committee had calculated for woods. There were no woods. Reavel Carter signaled back down the tunnel. The escape committee, conferring above ground, decided to continue. The risk of further delay was greater than the risk of partial visibility. The escapers proceeded at a rate of approximately 1 man every 3 minutes. Each man crawled the tunnel, emerged onto the snow, and moved at low crouch toward the woods. Most made it. Several were almost spotted. By 0:40 hours of March 25, 1944, 50 escapers were out of the tunnel. The night was approximately 1/3 over. By 215 hours, 62 escapers had cleared the tunnel. Bushell himself, escape position number 8, was among them. He had cleared the tunnel at 22:58. By 400 hours, 76 escapers had emerged. The pace was now slow, the rear echelon men were less practiced and the tunnel had begun to deteriorate. Each transit was taking approximately 15 minutes. At 515 hours, the 77th escaper emerged. He was Lieutenant Reginald Reavel Carter, Squadron Leader Reavel Carter's brother. He emerged into open snow. He was spotted by Corporal Hans Mueller of the camp's perimeter guard, on his 500-hour walking patrol. Mueller called for the duty officer. The duty officer ordered the camp alarm. The camp alarm sounded at 523 hours of March 25, 1944. The escape was over. 3 escapers were still in the tunnel. 11 were waiting in Hut 104. Most of those 11 would be recaptured before the day was out. What followed was the largest manhunt of the European war. Reichsfuhrer Heinrich Himmler personally directed the search from Berlin. Approximately 5 million German civilians and military personnel participated. Train stations across Germany, Czechoslovakia, Austria, France, and the Netherlands were placed under reinforced surveillance. Border crossings were closed. Identity document checks intensified. The Wehrmacht devoted approximately 70,000 troops to the search. Of the 76 escapers, the first was recaptured at Hirschberg railway station, 90 kilometers south of Sagan, at 1400 hours of March 25. He was Wing Commander Harry Day, age 45, RAF, of London. By the end of March 28, 1944, 4 days after the escape, 58 of the 76 escapers had been recaptured. By April 15, 73 had been recaptured. 3 remained at large. The 3 who remained at large were Per Bergsland, age 25, Norwegian Air Force, of Oslo, Jens Muller, age 26, Norwegian Air Force, of Bergen, and Bram van der Stok, age 28, Royal Netherlands Air Force, of Amsterdam. Bergsland and Muller traveled together through Germany by train, posing as Norwegian electricians returning to Stockholm. They reached the Swedish border at Lyskill on April 5. They crossed by fishing boat. They reached England via the Stockholm British Embassy on April 20. Bram van der Stok traveled alone through Germany, France, and Spain. He reached the British consulate in Madrid on July 8, 1944. He returned to England on July 11. His escape covered approximately 3,000 kilometers in 105 days. While the 3 reached safety, the 73 recaptured had been distributed across the Gestapo's central holding cells in Berlin, Breslau, Gorlitz, and Sagan. They were interrogated. Most were beaten. None gave the names of any non-escaping committee members. On the morning of March 28, 1944, Adolf Hitler convened a meeting in his Berlin office to discuss the response to the escape. Present were Heinrich Himmler, Hermann Göring, Wilhelm Keitel, and Ernst Kaltenbrunner. Hitler's instructions, recorded by his stenographer Helga Lutter, were that the recaptured escapers were to be made an example. Specifically, more than half were to be shot. Heinrich Himmler issued the operational order on March 29. The selected men, 50 of the 73 recaptured, were to be shot by Gestapo officers individually or in small groups, by roadside or woodline execution, on the road back to Stalag Luft III. The selection of the 50 was made by Gestapo headquarters in Berlin on the basis of the escapers' rank, nationality, and previous escape attempts. Senior officers were prioritized for execution. Multi-time escapers were prioritized. Squadron Leader Roger Bushell, the senior planner of the entire operation, was at the top of the list. He had been recaptured by SS guards at Saarbrücken main railway station on March 26, 1944, 2 days after his escape. He was held at the Gestapo headquarters in Saarbrücken from March 26 to March 28. He was interrogated. He was not beaten. He gave the names of no committee members. On the morning of March 29, 1944, Bushell was driven from the Gestapo's Saarbrücken headquarters by 2 Gestapo officers, Criminal Commissar Emil Schultz, age 35, and Criminal Secretary Walter Breithaupt, age 33. The car traveled approximately 20 kilometers north of Saarbrücken on the road to Lebeck. At a wooded section near the village of Hassel, the car stopped. Schultz told Bushell they were stopping for a urination break. Bushell got out of the car. He walked to the edge of the woods. Schultz drew his Walther PPK pistol. He shot Bushell once in the back of the head from a range of approximately 2 meters. Squadron Leader Roger Joyce Bushell, age 33, of Springs, Transvaal, of Wellington College, of Pembroke College Cambridge, of the Inner Temple, of 92 Squadron of the Royal Air Force, was killed at 09:52 on the morning of March 29, 1944. His body was photographed in situ by Gestapo photographer Heinrich Ludeck as documentary evidence of execution. The body was then driven to the crematorium at Saarbrücken City Cemetery. It was cremated at 1400 hours. The ashes were placed in a wooden urn approximately 20 centimeters tall, sealed with a rubber gasket, and labeled with Bushell's prison camp identification number. The urn was driven to Stalag Luft III by Gestapo courier on April 3. Between March 29 and April 13, 1944, the Gestapo executed 49 other recaptured escapers in a similar manner. Each was killed by gunshot to the back of the head at a roadside or woodline location. The 50 included 13 British officers, 6 Canadians, 6 Polish officers serving in the RAF, 5 Australians, 3 South Africans, 3 New Zealanders, 2 Norwegians, 2 Czechs, 2 French, and 2 Greek. Plus 6 others representing 9 additional Allied nations. The senior officer killed, after Bushell, was Group Captain Harold Day, age 45, of the Royal Air Force. Day was the second highest-ranking British officer in Stalag Luft III. He was shot near Gorlitz on April 5. Sergeant Tim Whalen, the head of the Dean and Dawson forgery section, the man who had hand-copied 250 German identity documents over 11 months, was shot on March 31, 1944, near Munich. He was 27 years old. Pilot Officer Wally Floody, the Toronto mining engineer who had designed and supervised the construction of all 3 tunnels, was not among the 50 killed. He had been assigned escape position number 203. He never reached the tunnel. When the alarm sounded at 523 hours of March 25, Floody had been sleeping in Hut 104. He was returned to the camp. He survived the war as a prisoner. He was repatriated to Canada in May 1945. Of the original 200 selected escapers, only 76 made it out of the tunnel. Of those 76, only 3 reached home. Of the 73 recaptured, 50 were murdered. The mathematical efficiency of Bushell's plan was, by post-war assessment, 4%. The 50 wooden urns containing the ashes of the executed officers were delivered to Stalag Luft III in 3 separate shipments between April 5 and April 29, 1944. Camp Commandant Lindiner Wildow personally received the first shipment. Lindiner Wildow read the accompanying documentation. He understood, immediately, what had happened. He demanded a meeting with the Gestapo officers who had brought the urns. He was refused. On April 5, 1944, Lindiner Wildow resigned his command of Stalag Luft III in writing. His resignation letter, addressed to the Luftwaffe High Command, contained a single operative sentence. He wrote, "I cannot continue to command an installation whose former occupants are being murdered by other German agencies after recapture." He was arrested by the SS on April 6. He was placed under house arrest at Gorlitz prison. He survived the war. He was held by the SS through May 1945. He was liberated by U.S. forces at Spangenberg Castle on May 5, 1945. He testified at the Nuremberg trials in 1946. He died of natural causes in 1963 at the age of 83. On May 15, 1945, 8 days after the German surrender, the senior surviving Royal Air Force officer in Europe, Air Chief Marshal Sir Sholto Douglas, ordered the formation of an investigative team to identify and prosecute those responsible for the murders of the 50. The team was the RAF Special Investigation Branch. Its commanding officer was Wing Commander Wilfred Robert Freddie Bowes, age 42, of London, a former Metropolitan Police detective who had been seconded to RAF investigations in 1941. Bowes was assigned a deputy and a team of 17 Royal Air Force investigators. They were given operational authority across all 4 Allied occupation zones in Germany, Austria, and the Netherlands. They were given a single instruction: find them all. Bowes's investigation lasted 3.5 years, from May 1945 to October 1948. It involved approximately 14,000 interrogations of former Gestapo personnel, approximately 3,000 identifications of known Gestapo officers, and approximately 800 extraditions from across Western Germany. By October 1948, Bowes's team had identified 38 Gestapo officers as direct participants in the murders of the 50. Of those 38, 21 were apprehended, tried by the British Hamburg Military Court, and convicted of war crimes. Of the 21 convicted, 14 were sentenced to death by hanging. The remaining 7 were sentenced to imprisonment of varying lengths, from 10 years to life. The hangings were carried out at Hameln Prison between October 1948 and December 1948. Among those hanged was criminal commissar Emil Schultz, the Gestapo officer who had personally killed Squadron Leader Roger Bushell at Hassel near Saarbrücken on March 29, 1944. Schultz was hanged on December 11, 1948, at 14:03 hours. Of the 17 Gestapo officers identified by Bose's team but never apprehended, 12 had been killed in action, by Soviet forces, or by suicide before May 1945. 5 had escaped to South America via the post-war Nazi escape lines known as ratlins. Of the 5 who escaped to South America, 4 were eventually located by Israeli, Argentine, or West German intelligence between 1949 and 1968. 3 were extradited to West Germany for trial. 2 received life sentences. The 4th committed suicide in his Buenos Aires apartment in 1973. The 5th, Standartenführer Wilhelm Scharpwinkel, the Gestapo regional commander who had ordered Bushell's specific execution, was never located. He was last reported alive in São Paulo, Brazil, in 1976. He would be 98 years old in 2026 if still living. The 50 wooden urns of the executed officers were preserved at Stalag Luft III through May 1945. They were recovered by U.S. forces during the camp's liberation on May 7, 1945. They were transported to England in October 1945. The urns were distributed to the families of the 50 between November 1945 and March 1947. Each was returned to its National Grave Registration Authority. Each was buried in the appropriate National Military Cemetery. Roger Bushell's urn was buried at the Old Garrison Cemetery in Poznan, Poland, on December 17, 1947. His grave is, in 2026, marked by a Commonwealth War Graves Commission headstone. The headstone bears the inscription, Roger Joyce Bushell. Killed by the Gestapo. March 29, 1944. The 50 are also commemorated by a single collective memorial at the site of the former Stalag Luft III, near Sagan in modern Poland. The memorial was unveiled by the Polish government in 1947. It lists all 50 names in alphabetical order. An annual ceremony at the memorial is conducted on the morning of March 25, the anniversary of the escape's discovery. Attendance, in 2026, is approximately 300 persons, mostly descendants of the 50. The senior surviving veteran of the Great Escape was Pilot Officer Bram van der Stok, the Dutch officer who had reached England via Spain. He died in Hawaii on February 8, 1993, at the age of 77. Van der Stok had served as a fighter pilot for the Royal Netherlands Air Force through the remainder of the war. He had moved to the United States in 1946 to attend medical school at the University of Utah. He had practiced as a physician in Hawaii from 1951 until his retirement in 1985. He had given approximately 40 interviews about the Great Escape over his lifetime. His standard response to the question of how 3 of 76 made it home, while 50 were murdered, was that the question contained its own answer. He told the historian Arthur Durand in 1985, 3 of us happened to be in the right train compartment, in the right town, at the right hour. The 50 were not. The math is the cost. There is no plan that survives the math. Per Bergsland and Jens Muller, the 2 Norwegians who had reached Sweden, both died in Norway in the 1990s. Bergsland on March 23, 1992, age 73. Muller on August 19, 1996, age 78. Both had served in the Royal Norwegian Air Force after the war. Both had returned to civilian flying. Both had spoken publicly about the Great Escape only sparingly. Muller's son Steinmuller, in a 2014 interview, said his father had described the escape as the worst day of my life that did not end with my death. Wally Floody, the Canadian mining engineer who had designed the tunnels, returned to Canada in 1945. He worked in the Ontario gold mining industry until his retirement in 1985. He served as a consultant on the 1963 film The Great Escape. He died on September 26, 1989, at the age of 71. The 1963 film The Great Escape, directed by John Sturges and produced by United Artists, was based on a 1950 non-fiction book by Paul Brickhill, an Australian Royal Air Force pilot who had been a prisoner at Stalag Luft III. Brickhill had drawn lottery position number 104. He had not made it through the tunnel. He had been one of the 11 men in Hut 104 when the alarm sounded. He had survived the war as a prisoner. The film starred Steve McQueen as a fictional American pilot named Captain Hiltz. McQueen's character was a composite of multiple real Stalag Luft III prisoners. The famous motorcycle escape sequence, Hiltz jumping a barbed wire fence on a motorcycle, was entirely fictional. The film grossed $11 million on a $4 million budget in its initial release. It has been re-released theatrically in 1985, 1995, 2003, and 2013. It is, in 2026, the most viewed prisoner of war film in cinema history. The accuracy of the 1963 film, as a depiction of the historical events, is approximately 50%. The escape, the tunnel construction, the discovery of Tom, the use of penguins, and the murder of the 50 are all factually accurate. The motorcycle scene is not. The American escape protagonists are not. The single American at Stalag Luft III who participated in the Great Escape was Captain David Jones, age 28, of the U.S. Army Air Forces. Jones had been transferred to Stalag Luft III in March 1943. He drew lottery position number 68. Jones successfully exited the tunnel at 3:47 in the morning of March 25, 1944. He was recaptured at Sagan railway station at 1500 hours of March 26. He was returned to the camp. He was not selected for execution. He was the only American who had escaped the tunnel. He survived the war. He died at his home in Tucson, Arizona, on November 10, 2008, at the age of 93. His obituary in the Arizona Daily Star ran to 3 paragraphs. What the Great Escape asks us, 82 years after 76 men crawled through a tunnel 60 centimeters wide and emerged into the snow north of Stalag Luft III, is the same question Bram van der Stok answered to Arthur Durand in 1985. The question was, how do you measure an escape plan whose primary effect is the murder of 50 officers by an enemy whose hands were already deeply stained with millions of other deaths? Van der Stok answered, you measure it by the 3 who made it home and the question they could no longer ask. Roger Bushell asked the question first, in 1942, in a conversation with the Czech resistance officer who had sheltered him for 6 weeks. He told the Czech officer, when the war ends, the German High Command will pay for what they have done. I want to be alive to see it. He was not. He was killed in a wood north of Saarbrücken on March 29, 1944. He was 33 years old. He had escaped twice before. The third escape was the one that worked. The third escape was also the one that killed him. So this is the question the Great Escape leaves us with, 82 years after Squadron Leader Lawrence Reavel Carter emerged from Tunnel Harry into the snow 9 meters short of the woods at 21:42 on the night of March 24, 1944. When 76 men make a plan that takes 11 months to build, and 3 of them reach home, and 50 of them are murdered for trying, what is the cost of escape? Bushell asked the cost in 1942. He was answered in 1944. The Royal Air Force Special Investigation Branch answered the asker in 1948. 21 Gestapo officers were hanged. 50 wooden urns were buried in 50 national military cemeteries between Hawaii and Norway. The tunnel called Harry, 60 centimeters wide, is, in 2026, marked by a small concrete pylon at the site of Stalag Luft III. The pylon reads, in Polish, English, and German, out of 50. 3 came home.